Kanu faces life for incitement, yet many who kidnapped and killed remain untouched, with facing no consequences. How do you explain this double standard?
Well, I have had a lot of conversation about Nnamdi Kanu's situation, including revealing to the Nigerian people that his trial was pre-planned. Everything that eventually played out on the day of his conviction had already been exposed by me on November 5. Maybe we are only lucky that we fought a bit through the Free Nnamdi Kanu protest to have saved Nnamdi Kanu from the hangman's noose. They were going to sentence him to death. That was the plan. And you can check my Twitter and Facebook posts on November 5, because I was giving that information in advance. They also, as a result of that, got very upset that we had a protest in Abuja. They shot at us, tear gas, arrested his lawyers, myself, later, and took us to the courts outside of, within Abuja, but, near Kuje, and sent us to prison for 4 days. After we were granted bail on a Friday, the judge who was supposed to sign off on our bail paper ran away. He didn't come back until Monday. They were already setting the agenda for Nnamdi Kanu's conviction, or whatever they were going to do. But when they realized that maybe this is not popular or not going to be popular, they kind of pulled back a bit and did the life imprisonment. And they have also realized that even the life imprisonment has not stopped his life or the life of what he stood for. Because it came at a time that, like I've always said, he prophetically predicted some of the things that are happening in Nigeria now. And when he was eventually convicted, those things have come full circle in terms of terrorism, the unchecked activities of the people you call terrorists or bandits who have been given preferential treatments in Nigeria over time. They always have the right, they can drive around in their convoys with vehicles seized from the Nigerian army. One of them wore a uniform of a police commissioner, an assistant police commissioner he killed. He wore his uniform to town. They were carrying their magazines and their heavy-duty weapons and ammunition and addressing press conferences. I insist that till date, the only evidence that was adduced against Nnamdi Kanu in his trial, the whole trial, was that he had a microphone and he had a radio transmitter and his underwear, both top and bottom, that he found in a hotel. Every other evidence they claimed was against him were things that were circumstantial. Oh, he said that the people should kill police, even when he was not in the country. Oh, he was the one who made NSAS to become what it is. But there are celebrities in Nigeria who claim they started NSAS. I started NSAS in Abuja. And I was the one who gathered a lot of people that joined NSAS by calling them individuals, some of the celebrities. So if those ones are being celebrated for doing NSAS, why is Nnamdi Kanu being sent to prison for life just for speaking on the day of NSAS to say, oh, do this or whatever they said he said? So everything they accuse him of are things that they had no evidence caused any problem, that they adduced caused. They even accused him of killing Gulag while he was in detention. I know something about being in DSS detention. You have zero access to communication. Even if you smuggle something, and they have a way of monitoring you. So how could somebody like that be sentenced to death? And a terrorist from one of the Boko Haram commander was sentenced to 20 years in prison. That is why Nigeria is where it is today. Some people in our animal farm, some animals are superior to others. And until that is addressed, until the justice applies to everybody in Nigeria, you are not going to get peace without justice. That's what so many of us have been saying, whether you like to hear it or not. But I feel it has come full circle now, that even those who felt like they can bamboozle others by saying, oh yeah, he did this, he's a bad person, they are now dealing with the real bad people. Unfortunately though, those real bad people have cover. They have immunity.
Okay. We're going on a break right now. We're still going to continue this conversation because you're digging right deep into it. So if Kanu's sentencing was influenced by ethnic bias and not the law, legally, how do you interpret that perception and what's your position on it?
Yes, thank you very much for bringing up this topic. One thing people need to understand is that it's not necessarily that other considerations would have come into play in a decision of court if somebody does not succeed in his case being upheld or in his defense being upheld. I know that there's that perception out there, but before you can conclude on what actually transpired in the judgment, it will be important for anybody who wants to comment on it to read the 144-page document, judgment of the court, to be able to understand the decision of the court and how the court arrived at its judgment. You may not necessarily be satisfied with the judgment, but that does not ordinarily on its own, on its face, impute ethnic reasons or other not less noble reasons for the decision.
Okay. So let's get back to Sowere in the house, please. Some say Southeast power brokers and not the presidency are the ones driving Kanu's continued detention. So how is this shaping regional politics and what should Nigerians expect in 2027? Sowere, the question is for you.
Let me first state this. Yes, let me first state this, that I'm not here to fan ethnic differences, but I have said, and I will restate here, that Nigeria has an Igbo problem. And this, of course, emanated historically from the Civil War, where we claim that it was no vanquished and no victor. But ultimately, there was a vanquished person. If you had 10 million naira before the war, you are giving 20 naira after the war. You are the one vanquished. It is said to you, you cannot be promoted in the army because you can't be trusted. You are the one vanquished. If you cannot get promoted within the civil service because you can't be trusted, you are the one vanquished. To come to your question, and just to say that anybody who says that an Igbo man is not treated differently is just lying. That's the truth. Well, all of us know this. That's a big elephant in the room. And that is what I said earlier when I said, well, there's a Boko Haram guy who has been killing, beheading people, and he was sentenced to 20 years. And the guy who uses a microphone and a radio transmitter is sent to prison for life. They could have sentenced him to death if something hadn't taken place. Then to go to your question about the issue of how the regional power brokers behaved. I was in the midst of it. I was the one calling them off for protests. And I knew what I went through in the hands of the governors, House of Rep members, senators in the Southeast. They all flatly and vehemently, without speaking, refused to encourage their people to participate in anything that could peacefully. It was a peaceful protest planned. So who did we rely on? We relied on those in the markets to close down their markets. But the major leaders, including the deputy speaker, he came out shamelessly asking that Igbos should sit at home and you should show that you are cowards. There's no cowardice in peaceful protest. The reason is that they believe that Nnamdi is too powerful politically, and that if he's released, he will have some impact on their political influence and popularity in the zone. They know that they are not popular, but they have all relied on the center to get whatever they want, to keep control over the southeastern political, people. And they know that they are running out of time. If Nnamdi Kanu is released, that would not continue. We will no longer enjoy what they are enjoying now. Whatever it is, whether it is fake or real popularity or power, they will lose it. They know it. Because I will reveal to you today that one of the biggest issues with the Nigerian state and Nnamdi Kanu is that they couldn't get him to promise that he would renounce his agitation for Biafra. That's the biggest problem. That was his main crime. They said it, if they even proposed to me that I should go tell him to enter his defense, and if he enters his defense, then if they release him, he should promise that he will form a political party and participate in politics. And if he can do that, they will have no problem with him. He said, no, I want the Biafran, I want my region to be different from Nigeria because Nigeria doesn't, cannot support our aspiration for greatness. Now, my caveat is a nation. So the regional leaders we are talking about, I called all of them, I called all the governors, at least I know Soludo. I used to be able to reach him. I mentioned here that the governor of his state, Abia, was a columnist at Sahara Reporters. So I called a lot of them. No one of them picked my call. No one of them has called me back because what we want is not what they want. They want what they call a political solution. A political solution is that you jail him first and then we'll beg you to free him on certain conditions. So that tag of ex-convict, they wanted it badly. All of them are agreed on that. The question is, how did they release him? Nobody can tell you when they will release him. They don't plan to release him because of his refusal to endorse their political agenda in the Southeast. That is the problem. They don't want to hear his name. But the people of the Southeast, the regular people, are in love with him. And we've seen that with what happened in protests, how markets were closed across the country without a whimper. And they still are going to fight to ensure that Nnamdi Kanu is free. I will still fight to ensure that Nnamdi Kanu is free from this unjust incarceration into which he's been thrown. And don't forget, and I'll say this in closing, that this is the same way Ken Saro-Wiwa was treated in 1995, this 2025. I guess every 20 years, or is it every 30 years, Nigeria needs a victim, either in prison or in the Golo time. And guess what? It happened in November 2025. Ken Saro-Wiwa was November 1995. 30 years later, the country hasn't learned its lessons.
Okay. Thank you so much, Sowere, for that. So let me ask you, Jimmy, during a security emergency, what human rights obligations must Nigeria still uphold? And how do they affect our international credibility? Okay,
this is an interesting question. During a security emergency, the law expects that the country would uphold Chapter 4 of the Constitution, which deals with fundamental rights, human rights. However, where there is a declaration of state of emergency, now we should be able to differentiate the two, because Section 45, subsection 3 talks about a proclamation of state of emergency. Recently, the president came up and said that there is talked about declaration of security emergency. But having not gone through the process of Section 305, which deals with proclamation of state of emergency, which also involves the National Assembly coming to decide that matter with the requisite majority, you cannot really say that, legally speaking, that we have a state of emergency on security. But the statement of the president can be seen in terms of a policy directive for the executive, that the executive is seeing this as a more serious issue. Now, that being the case, and being that a state of emergency has not been declared in accordance with the law, the entire Section 45, the entire Chapter 4 of the Constitution will have to be complied with, subject to Section 45, subsection 1, which says that where there is a law reasonably justifiable in a democratic society, certain fundamental rights can be restricted, like Section 37, Section 38, issues with Section 39, Section 40, Section 41, issues dealing with the right to freedom of movement, right to liberty, and some other rights can actually be restricted even where there is no proclamation of state of emergency. So I think what we have currently is not a situation where there has been a proclamation of state of emergency. So those rights in in chapter 4 would not cannot be derogated from except within limits provided under section 45 subsection 1. Again, even in a situation of war or a situation of proclamation of state of emergency, again, Nigeria must comply with international humanitarian laws, that is dealing with the laws of war. It could also be called the laws of war, meaning that civilians must be protected, women and children must be...
Uses as a cabal, there's a group of advisors, there's a shadow cabinet, there's a kitchen cabinet. They have all kinds of label for them. But the question you should ask yourself is that if you are going to be president of Nigeria, didn't you go there with your own cabal? So it's a question of character of leadership. It's not any cabal. There's no cabal anywhere that you walk into Aso Rock and says you cannot govern. There's no cabal that says a bulldozer cannot construct a road. There's no cabal that stops, the cabal doesn't stop those in power from stealing. Like we had of the former central bank governor, Emefiele, and the rest of them that are now undergoing. This cabal doesn't stop them. But it is when it's time to perform that you start hearing of cabal. You know, I've stopped giving those excuses, except where we have clear evidence of such people, like we had under Ďêàlțh, where we knew that his wife and some people were, you know, controlling Nigerians, lying about the health of our husband, who had died maybe months before they finally declared him dead, and they were controlling the country. But even at that, wherever you hear of cabal, there's also complicity at all levels of government. It's a democratic government. In the Tinubu regime now, the cabal is, number one, the president and his office and his staff, people he brought in from Lagos. Clearly, those are the cabal members.
But there are
Then,
those who have argued.
in the judiciary,
Sorry, Sowere, but there are those who have argued.
Yeah,
there are those who have argued that this cabal exists, regardless of who the president is, and that they usually play a very prominent role in the decision that the presidents make. Sometimes they tie the president's hands behind his back. So are you saying this cabal doesn't exist?
so has any president ever told you? Has any president ever told you that they tied his hand behind his back?
No, but they won't say that. But from the actions that we're seeing,
you fall for that. You have them repeat.
so you're saying no cabal exists? No cabal exists.
Yeah, you know, the number one cabal in the country is the president of the country. In a powerful presidency like Nigeria's presidency,
Okay.
there's nobody who tells the president what to do. The president has a final say. Of course, there might be people, there might be special interests. There are special interests everywhere in the world politically. But in our own case, even the president of Nigeria is more powerful than the US president. All they do is what the president wants to hear. So if anybody is failing and they are telling there's a cabal, they are trying to shift the blame away from their own failure, glaring failure, to a shadowy group that you and I have no evidence exists, so that you keep helping them to repeat the excuse of why they failed in the first place. That's why we keep saying you should challenge these guys during the election. Don't let them run away from debates. Tackle them. You know, in the last election, we saw what you guys did in the press. You will not interview the people you claim are the main candidates. Every day you interview their minions. But when it comes to those of us who have ideas, we really get interviewed. Then when it comes to your analysts, they're analyzing the people who are going to fail. They don't analyze the people who have ideas. I saw it on this table, on Arise TV. You have some political analysts, all of them. They're always analyzing the people who have failed in their past jobs or who are going to fail. When you ask them, well, what about the other candidates? They say, oh, those ones don't matter. But that is because you keep helping them to repeat the same lie that's a cabal. How can somebody tie the hand of the president of Nigeria behind his back? Who? Who is that person? Is he the IG of police, or is he in the army? Is he retired or serving? Who? Is he a traditional ruler? There's nothing like that, because the way Nigerian society is, the person who is number one becomes everything. He's a traditional ruler, he's a chief priest, he's the president, he's the chief judge, he's the Senate president, he's the Speaker of the House.
But if that's
you know
the case,
how these things work.
if that's the
but
case,
when they want to lie to you, when they want to lie to you, They'll tell you, oh, somebody's holding, they tie somebody's back behind it. That's what judges always say to you all the time.
Oh.
Well, I would have given you bail. Somebody is tying my... How do you say that in a democratic society and we keep repeating it? If somebody's hand is tied behind his back, he should leave power, resign.
But
let him use the last opportunity he has, grab a pen and resign, and let people whose hand cannot be tied behind their back assume power, and you see the difference in hours.
But if that's the case, and you say the president is so powerful, the #1 most powerful person in Nigeria, why do we now seem to be be in a compromising situation where we try to negotiate with the bandits, as we have seen? Why do we do that? Why don't we just arrest and do capital punishment for them?
It is because your president is incapable of doing what he was elected or appointed
but if he's the most powerful
or selected
person
to do.
But if he's as powerful as you say he is, the most powerful person, why should he be...
You can have a powerful position, and not have a powerful character or competent character. We have seen that happen all over the world. You see, there was a time the US, I think it was Roosevelt, or one of their presidents, was wheelchair bound. Nobody knew because he was performing his job very well. But in Nigeria, you see an able-bodied president, you know, and he's not really able-bodied. You just present him as an able-bodied person. Mentally, he's gone. Physically, he's gone. They pump them up. They come and say something. They say, oh, you know, keep repeating that. That is what is the problem. What I'm saying is that the position of president of Nigeria is a powerful position. I am not saying that the people who have run those places are powerful people, because most of them are intellectually bankrupt. Some of them are physically incapable of doing things, and there's nothing wrong with having physical incapacitation, but you just have to reveal it so that we know the extent to which you can do and not do your job.
Thank you so much.
That's why I told you earlier.